Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a Wrestling Mind podcast. Enjoy the show.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
Welcome back to a Wrestling Mind podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. How we doing, y'all? Thanks for listening. Reece Humphrey is our guest today, and he's a bad man. 3-time World Team member, 2-time NCAA All-American, and was forced to deal with one of the toughest things that could happen to a wrestler, having your weight class eliminated. During his senior wrestling career, his weight class was cut, and he actually had to go down in weight class for a massive weight cut, and then back up in weight for the 2016 Olympics. Can't wait for you guys to hear how he thinks about and deals with adversity. And before we get into the interview, you know what time it is, everybody. It's Fan of the Week time. This week's Fan of the Week is my brother, Tanner. Wrestled alongside me, our entire lives together. Really appreciate his support for the podcast. Thanks for listening, my man. And hey, if you guys want to support the podcast, give us a review or subscribe on iTunes. Now, let's get into the interview with Reece Humphrey. Reece Humphrey, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I think just to start, you grew up with a really unique situation. Your dad was a 5-time world team member, a world silver medalist. Just what was that like growing up in that kind of environment?
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So all his friends were all wrestlers, and they're world silver medalist, NCAA champion. It's just like such a normal thing coming through my childhood, and everybody wants to put their hands on you and wrestle with you. And so throughout that whole time, they all wrestled me, and I got to know all those guys, but they were just my dad's buddies. They weren't these guys that most people idolize, or at least in the sport of wrestling. So they were just my buddies, and throughout all that, I didn't even know my dad wrestled. I'm sure that I had a glimpse of it, but I never really put two and two together, as weird as that might sound. I kind of knew he was a wrestler, but never understood the caliber that he was at. And it actually attributes to one of the greatest things is he never pushed me in wrestling, and he never even really introduced the sport to me. I'm sure he taught me some of the basics, like keeping my head up and keeping my back straight when I was basically wrestling or fighting my brother in the living room. But other than that, there was nothing until the 6th grade. When I came home from middle school one day, I said, "Dad, my best friend he's a wrestler. I think I'm going to try wrestling." And I remember his eyes lit up. It was such a monumental moment for me. I was like, "Wow, he's really into this," and I didn't even know why. So, and it's just wrestling's so tough. It has to be for yourself. And there's a lot of as I'm raising my boy and my daughter, there's so many things that have to be learned and wanted for yourself. It makes it a lot easier to go through that tough process if you really want it for yourself. You understand the reasoning for it. If someone's pushing you in it and you're doing it for someone else, you can push at a really hard level and a really high level, but it's not to that maximum effort that you can give when you really want something just because you want it. And I think that's huge. And I see all these people trying to be entrepreneurs after wrestling, and these are all really tough people. But if they want it for themselves, they go that extra mile and they go to another level. But if they're doing it for someone else, or because they think they're supposed to do these things, or trying to accomplish something for someone else, it's just they still know a very high level of work, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and I think that getting to that really special place of pushing the wall back every day, most people have no idea what that even feels like. I mean, you certainly do. You're a 3-time world team member, but getting to that state of discomfort is got to be something that only comes from this insane burning passion deep inside. And if it's for someone else, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm coming to that realization now as I'm done with wrestling. The famous Gable quote, everything in life is easy after wrestling. And it's just not true. It's easier because I know I understand what real hard work is. But going back to that same point, I don't have the same passion for creating content. My next goals are vlogging and making a social media presence, which I've created in the past, but staying consistent is a bit of a challenge for me. When I was training full time, and it was just like, so everything, all the content was basically right in front of me. It was all easy. It's getting harder now, and it takes a different kind of discipline, different type of focus, and you have to find different things that you're interested in to keep yourself motivated. But I'm finding that after wrestling, everything is not easy. You still have to find different ways to motivate yourself and to keep that passion and that fire, because with wrestling, it was so, if I put in work, I get better. And I really wanted to be world champion, Olympic champion, and those things didn't come to fruition for me. But, it was so right in front of my face every day. I trained with Logan Stieber and Sean Bunch, who were always, we were like 1-2 or 1-3 on the Team USA ladder. And that fight and that passion was just right in front of my face. It's like, if I skipped a sprint or I didn't go 100%, I watched it right next to me that he would pass me. So I wouldn't have to visualize anything, having partners like Stieber and Bunch and Jaggers and having Kyle Snyder in the room, who is world and Olympic champion, and Tervel Delagnev is a couple-time Olympian. These guys it's just greatness right in front of my face all day, every day. So it was very hard to slack off. And so now that I'm retired from competitive wrestling and moving into coaching, I have to find these different types of motivation within myself. So it's a little different, but still fun and challenging.
Well, I think that's why the notion of having business mentors or professional mentors for former athletes is so important, especially for me, because, to your point, when you're on a team, when you're on the grind, you're in the grit together every day. And, at your level, working out with those guys, that must have been an insane level of competition. And so if you weren't up to par, it would show. How intense were those workouts back in the day?
Imagine the hardest thing you've ever done and then do it back to back for 365, So I'd work out. I have an awesome strength coach who's one of the craziest people on the planet. Dustin Myers, Coach Myers Gut Check on Instagram, if you like to follow him. He's got his own supplement company out now, Max Effort Muscle, who I'm fortunate enough to still be a part of. And so he had me basically as his number one client, and he would come to the Ohio State wrestling room and put me through, and he would want to put me through as hard as possible. So I would get pushed to the max, and then I'd go home and hang out with my kids. They were little at the time, so they were around all day. And then I would go straight to practice, where I have, NCAA champion and then world champion back to back to back with partners, and there's just no break. And we're just expected to go at a rate that it's very, very intense and grueling on a daily basis. When you're trying to murder yourself in the morning, and then just when you're just capable enough to get your feet on the mat and get mentally prepared again, it's go time, and then do it all over again.
Wow. Yeah, it must have been intense, obviously. And I do want to get into some of the world trials days and the Olympic trials days, but before we get there, you came into college on really an incredible streak. I think you went undefeated in middle school, 3-time state champ in high school. Your brother was a college wrestler. Your dad's a world silver medalist. So, you must have been heating up the kid circuit and high school circuits. Then you get into college. You're a multiple-time All-American. And then you get to the finals against another world-level athlete in Franklin Gomez, who was at Michigan State at the time. It didn't work out the way you wanted, obviously. What was it like the 5 minutes, 10 minutes after, and how long were you in that state of, probably it's extreme adversity, trying to bounce back from that? And how did you come back from that and then get back on the world circuit where you made such a name for yourself?
Well, freestyle is after collegiate wrestling, and folk style is during collegiate. And I wasn't quite as good at folk style wrestling. I did a lot of the wrestling on my feet, which is why I transitioned so fast and so easily into the freestyle circuit. And so not winning the NCAAs, being second as a junior, and I was a little bit big for the weight. I was cutting a little bit too much, so I was a little bit more inconsistent than I would like to be. And then trying to move up my senior year, I was a little bit too small. So excuses or whatever, I didn't get it done. But in my mindset, it was painful at the time, and it painful for a long time afterwards. It was on my mind all the time. I thought about Gomez, and I wanted to win that match and what I could have done differently. But instead of sitting there and crying about it, I didn't want that feeling again, so I got to work. And it's just such an incredible mindset that taught me a lot, not just about wrestling, but about life, because it's just so often in the workforce or with your family, something's going to knock you down all the time. And if you feel sorry for yourself, and I talked to my little boy Parker, I talked to him about being the victim. Someone's picking on you, then that's going to happen. Or if somebody's, if you get a bad grade on a test, you could feel sorry for yourself and you can cry about it, and you can push that work aside, or you can take it head on and try and not have that feeling again. And it just seems like a much better approach. And the people that take that perspective seem to be way more successful. And paying attention to all these people who are successful and what do they do, which is why being in the wrestling room with all these world-class athletes was so easy, because it was in front of your face all the time. It's like, well, if Tervel and Snyder and Logan and Jaggers they're all doing X, Y, and Z, and then the guys who are 500 or below 500 are doing A, B, and C, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It seems pretty obvious the three things you should be doing. And some people don't have that if they're not surrounded by greatness or they're the best in their field. So they have to make those decisions for themselves. It makes it a little bit more difficult. But not being the victim and paying attention to others that you aspire to be like is pretty important, I think.
Well, that's what's so great about the internet now, is that even if you are in a small community in some rural town somewhere, you have podcasts, you have these user groups. I mean, you can get maybe not the exact same, but you can get into some type of like mastermind group where you can vibe off each other and build off one another, which is what's exciting, right? And obviously one of the missions as to why we're having this call now is to get your message out there to these wrestlers who aren't in the Ohio State training room, or even to like young millennials who are out there on the grind and looking for some additional motivation. And so you have you go through college, and then you get on the world freestyle scene, and you end up making 3 world teams over probably 5 or 6 years. But one of the stories I love is, your first, I think it's one of your first U.S. Opens after college. I think you draw Mike Zadek in the semis. Right. Was that after the one right after college?
So I did one. I wrestled the NCAAs, and then I had the U.S. Open like a month later, and I got 4th at the Open and 4th at the trials, and then it was the next year.
Okay, so you draw Mike Zadek in the semis, and for the non-wrestler listeners, this guy is just like the grittiest, just to me like just tough son of a bitch you've ever seen. I mean, Iowa wrestler, just an animal. And you're going up against him and you end up beating him. But I'd love to know, like, coming into that match, what's your self-talk like? I mean, what are you saying to yourself? Does a light switch flip on and off as to when you're like normal Reece versus competitor Reece? What is that like pre-match build-up like?
Yeah, so I got a couple stories. I'll give you the before and the during.
Sure.
So before I knew what the seeds were going to be. I knew where I was going to sit on the ladder. So I was going to have Zadek in the semis, and then either Sean Bunch, who was a training partner of mine, or Coleman Scott were on the other side, who ended up being Olympic bronze medalist. So I thought those were 2 of the tougher, and obviously Zadek is right up there with them. He was getting a little bit older, but still very, very tough and world silver medalist. And but my goal was to retire him. So I wanted to retire Mike Zadek, and I had this in my head, had it in my head every single day. I was thinking, I would tell everybody, I'm gonna retire him. I'm gonna be the last match he ever wrestles, because I'm gonna wrestle him and I'm gonna beat him, and it's like that turning point. Some young kid comes up and takes out the world silver medalist. He's not gonna like that, and it's gonna be the beginning of the downfall or the beginning of the end for him. And this is the mindset I had, and I told everybody, and I wanted that match, and I prepared for it. I watched film. I knew exactly what he could do. I knew what I had to do to beat him, and it ended up going pretty much the way that I planned. I had to score late in some matches. I had to score early, or you had to win 2 out of 3 periods. So I had to score early once, and then I scored a little later the second time. And I scored in both periods, and so I don't know if you know the clinch and all that. So I didn't want to go into that and leave it up to chance. I hate the clinch. I lost my first 11 coin flips in the clinch, so I didn't ever want to go into that. But I wanted to retire Zadick, and so I'm in the match. I'm all prepared. I'm pumped up. I won the first period, and Zadick, just like you said, tough, in shape, conditioned Iowa guy. Like, he's going to be a brawler. And I'm starting to get tired. It's the middle of the second period, and we go out of bounds. And I'm coming back to the center, and for some reason, I thought that if he could hear me breathing, that would give him an edge. So I held my breath. So I'm walking back to the center, and I'm holding my breath. And there's no way that he would ever notice that. But for me, the mental edge of like, oh, yeah, I got him. He doesn't even know. I'm not even breathing hard. And I hear him breathing. I'm like, oh, man, he's breathing way harder than me. I got him. And that gave me a little bit of endorphin boost or some confidence boost that made it pretty easy. I don't remember ever really being exhausted in the match, just, normal, tired. But I was expecting to be in this really tough, gritty thing, and he was going to continue to push the pace. And that was just one of those little stupid tricks. It's something that was really important to me and stood out, which probably didn't affect him at all, but it changed everything from my perspective.
Well, it's crazy how you remember it. I mean, right away. I mean, it was probably less than 5 seconds in reality, but you remember it clear as day later.
Right.
And like, so you would go around, before the Open, you'd go around telling people that like you were gonna put him out. You had that self-belief going into the tournament, like just zero doubts to your mind that that's the way it was going to be.
Right, and I'm and this is to a default from my looking back at my career. I was always a realist. There's 2 things that can happen in a wrestling match: you can win, you can lose. And I knew that it was a chance that I could lose, but I knew if I tried really hard and I gave it my effort, I had a really good shot of beating him. And so it wasn't a false confidence. I really thought that I could, and obviously it worked out that way. And even in matches where the guy has more credentials than me, some of these Iowa guys, they really think they're going to win every single time, and they're so shocked when they lose, and they've lost to him 5 times, and I don't get that. I've never had that, and I think it's really beneficial to them. They really think they're going to win, and the matches that I've always really thought I was going to win, I tended to do better in. But I could never get past that. If somebody was a world champion and they beat me, I'd be like, at least I try hard. So I wish I had a little bit more of that false confidence. I was more of a realist when it came to match preparation and what I expected in the match. But that was one I really thought I could win, and it worked out that way.
It's interesting because you would think that all elite performers think like you were talking about, kind of like that, like Conor McGregor, like almost like bizarre self-confidence, self-belief in yourself.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you think there's a balance between the two.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fault. I wish I had that.
Okay.
But yeah, the guys, like you said, McGregor, just so supreme confidence. Like even when he lost, he ran out of time, or the ref screwed you. I've met a ton of guys like that, and I wish I had that when I was competing. But I don't know, man. I couldn't have the emotional roller coaster all the time. You win and you expect to win, and then if you lose, it's the worst thing in the world. Like I lost too much to have it be devastating every time, So I don't know. I wish I would have had that, but I never did.
Well, now that you're coaching, how do you balance that with your athletes? Do you try to impart that in them, or do you try to keep an even balance?
I love the guys who are supremely confident, but I also want them to wrestle the best guys in the room. And the more great guys you get your hands on, the more you realize how not great you are, And so if I'm the best in the country, I surround myself with Logan Stieber and Sean Bunch and guys who are bigger, Snyder and Travell, who I'll never get my hands on, but it's like, well, this is what real greatness is, And so I never wanted that confidence like that, because I always wanted to feel like the underdog and wanted to work like the underdog, and then the winning will take care of itself. And it never affected my effort or anything, but I just didn't have that emotional roller coaster after a loss like some of these guys do.
Well, you've mentioned him a couple of times here, and I think it's only fitting we talk about it just for a second. So today's Wednesday, March 14th. The greatest time of the year starts tomorrow, the Division I Nationals. We'll all be glued to it. And Kyle Snyder, the great Kyle Snyder, wraps up his college career tomorrow, or Saturday, I should say. You spent a lot of time with him. Just while we're on the subject, what makes him so great outside of his physical abilities? Because that is going to happen. Like, what is the difference for that guy? I mean, he's an unbelievable, maybe the greatest wrestler of all time. We'll see.
Yeah, he will be the greatest wrestler of all time. Not greatest American. I'm very confident he's going to be the greatest wrestler of all time. He's already
even like in the world level.
Yeah,
wow.
at everybody. He's
wow.
3 for 3 at the Worlds and the Olympics right now, and starting at 19 years old, 19, 20, and 21. So he's already proven to be the best American. He's just got to win a few more titles or be around. I think he's got at least 10 more years in him. So I'm sure there'll be some bumps along the way, but he's had some of the toughest challenges with Sadulayev and some of these other Russians. And I mean, he's wrestled the best of the best every time, and he finds a way. He's got ice in his veins. But what's just amazing about him is, and to be great like that, you'd have to just be perfect for this sport. He works insanely hard, hardest worker in the room. And on top of that, his body doesn't get tired in the first place. So his positioning is great. His intensity in the practice room, shooting 100 times even when he's getting uncomfortable. Even though he's the best guy in the room, he's still getting the most exhausted every day because he's shooting 50 times when everyone else is trying to block off and give him, and then the next guy gives him their 100%. So he puts himself in a situation where he can make it an equal fight, even if there's no chance or nobody in the world that can really fight him in the same weight class, So, and then just smart kid. He's mature, great guy to be around. I don't have one bad thing to say about him. He's not arrogant. He's trying to learn from everybody and being around the best guys. And I've recently worked out with TJ Dillashaw and hung out with some other UFC guys. And then I think about being around Burroughs and Tervel Delagnev and Snyder. And you would think these guys wouldn't want to hear the technique that I would want to give them, but these are the guys who are the most attentive in those situations. If I say something or some coach says something who's got less credentials than me or more, it doesn't matter. If it's a little kid, they're paying attention. Like, well, what are you doing here? Oh, okay, cool. I mean, it's just like there's a reason why they continue to improve and they continue to get better, is because they'll take information from anybody. And I think it's a huge lesson. So many people dismiss other people because their high school coach doesn't have a state title to his name, when the best guys are trying to learn from everybody, because learn from your dad, learn from your brother, learn from your high school coach, college coach. There's a lot of people that really care about your improvement as an athlete, and a lot of people block it out just because they don't have the credential, or because, that doesn't work for me. You're too tall, or you're too short, I'm stronger than that, or I'm weaker here. There's so many different excuses you can make for yourself, but those guys, Burroughs, Snyder, Tervel, Dillashaw, these are the guys who are looking me in the eyes and paying attention to everything that I say, and I'm nothing compared to those guys.
I didn't know that about Dillashaw. I mean, I would assume you'd worked with, the greats of the greats in like the current, world team, but that's pretty cool. You got to work with Dillashaw. He's out in Southern California at the training lab right now. Are you by there?
I'm like 45 minutes from them, so it's been a recent thing.
Nice.
We talked about doing it, and then he had his baby out in Colorado, and then he came back just recently, and so we've been working out a couple times a week, as much as we can, really. And man, just a great listener, great guy, just really wants to get better. And wrestling is it's his home base, but he hasn't done it in a while, so he's getting frustrated sometimes, but it's just still focused on the task at hand. And he understands the importance of it. So I love that guy. It's just what a stud,
That picture of him after the Cody Nolo fight, where they're like face to face, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs. That's just the rawest, purest, just adrenaline I've ever seen. I get goosebumps even thinking about it. And kind of on that line of being around the greats, learning from the greats, there's a story of you where you made the world team. I believe you're out at Colorado Springs. You're training for the World Championships. And at any given time, I think you said you had Cale Sanderson, John Smith, Bill Zadek, all these guys coaching you. Can you talk about that experience? Because I think it's just incredible to hear about that.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I could picture it today. It's such a surreal thing. All the, not just the greats of the sports, but the legends of American Olympic sporting, whatever you want to call it. I had like 5 world and Olympic champions. I think it was 6 world and Olympic champions working with specifically just me and my training partner, and I'm doing all the drills. So I'm just thinking, like,
so who was it?
It was Cale Sanderson, Dan Gable, John Smith, maybe Tom Brands was there. I mean, it's just the best of the best, I'm thinking.
Oh my God.
Slay and Zadok. So 6. So yeah, just a crazy situation, and it's an overlay. It's too much. It was too much to even process. But I'm just, we had like an hour and a half with that group, and it went by in a second. Everybody's got something, and then they're all talking. They're trying to learn from each other at the same time. I'm like, wow, you do that? Oh, I do this differently. And so it's just like, well, I'm definitely going to be able to figure out something that works for me, because they're all, the best of the best for completely different reasons.
So in that type of scene, or it's the World Championships, does everyone come together like that? Or is Cale working with his guys and Tom's working with Gilman and his guys? Like, how does that work out there?
There's, Zadok is the head coach of Team USA, and so he's working with everybody. And then Brands is going to be working with his elite level Iowa guys. So everybody's kind of segregated in that section. But if I ask Tom Brands a question, he is 100% answering it. And and we're all a team at that point, even though as heated as those rivalries can get. Wrestling has a respect around it that it's kind of unmatched. So as much as I wanted to punch people in the face during a match, right afterwards I'm ready to shake their hand and I'll be friends with them. Most of my closest friends on the international scene are guys in my weight or right around my weight, because I've bled and sweat with these guys, and it creates a bond when you basically get in a fist fight with somebody every day.
Yeah.
And so,
sounds weird, but it's so true, right?
It is. It's really true, and it's no one's being dirty or anything, so it's not like they're jerks about it. But I talk about wrestling Logan Stieber in practice and then wrestling in a real match, and there was one situation where he caught an arm bar on me, and he knows I have a bad shoulder, and he got it on that side, and he ran it as hard as he could, and it popped, and he stopped as soon as it popped, but he wasn't trying to hurt me. He respects me enough as an athlete to give it his 100%, and he was going to drive that shoulder as hard as he could, because the chance to take me to my back might not be there if he doesn't do that. So I never hated him for it. I never thought it was a bad thing that he did, but I actually respect it. I would want someone to go 100% and do exactly what they would do to somebody else if we're going to wrestle like that. So stepping on the mat with one of my better friends and putting ourselves in that situation, the only thing to do is to respect me enough to give it your 100. So if I beat you, I beat you. And if you beat me, then you really beat me.
Well, I think the one thing that we can all take away from that, wrestler or not, is when you step into your craft for the day. For you, it was stepping into the weight room in the morning and the practice room at night. For me, it's stepping into the sales office. I work from home, but the sales office each day. Like when I'm getting ready to go meet with clients, I have to be in a certain mindset. I think no matter what you're doing, podcasting, wrestling, business, whatever, I think what the main thing I'm taking away is that when it's time to go, you have to be 100% focused, no distractions, and that fire, that passion inside really has to come out and take you to that place where a lot of people aren't willing to go. That's just coming through loud and clear in this interview, for me at least.
Yeah, no doubt. The way to get ahead is to do things that other people don't want to do. And you've heard that a million times, but people don't get it because it's not even that much. Because I relate everything to wrestling, and I know what work it takes to be a successful wrestler. And everything's the same way. So even when I'm getting ahead of people, I still don't feel like I'm doing nearly as much as I could. So there's always another gear that I could ramp it up if I wanted to, but I just do a little bit extra, and it goes a long way. And people notice, and people want to give you promotions or give you better jobs and this and that. But it doesn't take that much. It's really not that much. It's maybe don't watch 1 hour of TV and put some work into something that you're passionate about, something that you've gotten drunk and told your friends that you want to do. I hear every time I party with people, they have these ideas. I'm like, I don't want the idea guy. I want the guy who's going to have one idea that's not that great, but he's going to work for it.
The action guy.
The action guy. I just want the guy who's going to actually do what he says, because everybody's got the $1 million idea, but I want the guy with the $1,000 idea that's actually going to do it.
Yep. No, I'm reading a book right now by Ryan Holiday, Obstacle is the Way, and there's a whole piece on action. Really great book if you haven't read it. I know we're getting ready to wrap this up here. I do want to get to one point, though, and that was coming into this, one of my main focuses, but I try to let these things be as conversational as possible. Speaking of the Obstacle is the Way, you had probably one of the most, I guess, any way you could look at it, inopportune things happen to you during the Olympic quad going into 2016. You've made world teams. You're kind of like the guy now, right? I mean, I think you made like 2 or 3 in a row, world teams that is, and then the highly corrupt, highly bizarre, in my opinion, wrestling federation drops a weight class. They drop your weight class, forcing you to either go down to a cut that's unmanageable or go up. Can you just talk through that? Like for those of, even for like the non-wrestlers, like what happened? And I mean, what did you do to that? I mean, it was just, reading about it was really hard. I got sick to my stomach just reading about what happened. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. So I was always cutting a lot of weight to make 60 kilos. And then, but I mean, the Olympics are coming up, and I'm thinking like, all right, well, I can do it for a couple more years and really have a good chance of being on the team. And then they drop the weight. They go from 7 weights to 6, and they don't change any. They just take one out, and it's mine. So it's a little bit worrisome. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm cutting a lot of weight, and I'm actually.
How much weight are you cutting? Just out of curiosity.
Like 27, 28 pounds.
What is 60 kilos? Like
132. And I weighed
and so
right
you're
around
walking
60,
around
60, 58 at the time, maybe.
Even when you're training, you're that light? Or this is like...
Yeah, this is in shape, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe, 56 if I'm watching it. But yeah, to get down there, it was
so you say, okay, maybe there's a silver lining here. I'll go up in weight, and that's like the best news for any wrestler. Okay.
I'll still have to cut weight, and I'll still, I'll still be big and strong, but there was it's a different sport. I equate the two lightweights as one sport. There's a lot of action from the outside and a lot of quickness and athleticism and trickery and misdirection. And then 65 and 70 now, or 74 back then, they start to get a lot more gritty and a lot more hand fighting. The guys are stronger, and they know how to hold position a lot better. And it was just a whole huge thing I had to adapt and try and change the way that I wrestled in a very short amount of time. So I went up to try and get used to it, and then I did okay. I got second at Dave Schultz International, which was good, and then but then I got, I don't know, something, maybe fifth at the Open or something, and I hated it. I hated the feeling of not being where I was when it was just like so recent where I was on top. So I decided to go back down for one more year and then just try and jump back up for the Olympics. But I figured I'd want another shot at making a world team and winning the Worlds, because that was really my goal. I didn't care if it was Olympic or World Championships. It's the same guys, same process. I just wanted to be the best in the world at something. I thought that was my best chance to do it, so I gave it one more shot and cut the weight all the way back down. But the up and down, it wasn't really beneficial to the end game. But I made another world team. I won another U.S. Open. I think the cut was worth it. But then trying to jump back up to wrestle at the Olympics was a little bit difficult. But I think I still had a shot to make the team. But it was very, very deep weight with a lot of tough guys. As you can imagine, it's 2 weight classes together.
Brutal weight. Absolutely brutal weight.
But
well,
man, when it happened, like I was talking about earlier, I could have felt sorry about it or could have done this and that, but I made my decisions and I played the cards that I was dealt, and I have no regrets. I loved every second of it. I think I could have done a couple things different. I think I've learned a lot of things more about positioning and hand fighting now that I'm out of competing at the highest level. So I am really excited about taking this new job and getting my hands on some elite level guys again to see if I can implement some of these things that I've been working on with a different mindset as a coach instead of an athlete. But yeah, man, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you mentioned a couple of things. First of all, is that like when any of the listeners encounter something difficult in their day, step back, detach from it. 9 times out of 10, it's not as earth-shattering to their world as this was to you. You maybe were down about it, maybe still down about it, but I mean, maybe you were down about it where you weren't really doing anything else for maybe a day, a couple hours. I'm not sure exactly, but bottom line is that you said, okay, I have a couple options here, right? I can go up, and even though you went up for that year and you had what any wrestler would be lucky to have a year like that, still competing at the highest level in the U.S., you learn a new skill, you learn some hand fighting technique, then you go back down. In 2015, you tech your way to the finals. I think you wrestled Dennis in the finals, Jimmy Kennedy in the trials. You make another world team, and then you get another year that mental toughness you get from cutting 30 pounds or 28 pounds, whatever it is. So I think bottom line, and kind of what I was hoping to get out of this interview that we've certainly dug into, is that any task worth doing, no matter what it is, if it's sewing, if it's singing, wrestling, business, sales, whatever, there are going to be obstacles, and like how you respond to those is literally how successful you're going to be in life. And you certainly overcame that at a number of different places. So I think just to close things out, I mean, any last words to the listeners on that notion of obstacles and turning each obstacle into an opportunity? Anything on that like you've used throughout your life to guide you on the path you're on?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's as simple as that. These little bumps in the road, you're not special. Someone else has been hit harder. Some other people don't get hit as hard, but you got hit with something, take it on the chin and move forward. The people who get upset about it and start to think about why me, I mean, any podcast you listen to, you'll come across stories of people who don't do that. Don't be the victim. Think about, what can I do to improve my situation? How is my actions going to affect me? Don't think about trying to get somebody back or doing this and that. It's not worth it. Just take it on the chin and move forward.
Yep, that's it, man. Well, cool. I can't thank you enough. I know you're out on the West Coast right now, out there for another week before you head off. Just before we go, do you want to speak to what you're going to be doing at your new role, and then where can folks find you online on the social channels?
Sure. So right now I coach a kids club, high school and youth guys at Titan Mercury Youth out in California. My brother's getting ready to take over my position. He was my assistant out here, and so now he's going to be the head coach, which I'm really thrilled about. And I'm moving up in the world, moving from the high school programs to collegiate and senior level athletes over at Princeton and Rutgers University at the New Jersey Regional Training Center, the NJRTC. So I'm really excited about that. And if you're looking to find some motivation or athletic tricks, you can check me out at Highlight Humphrey on Instagram, Highlight Hump on Twitter, and check my YouTube channel out. I'm just getting rolling on that. YouTube.com/Highlight Humphrey. So there you have it. Check me out.
Check it out, people. You will see some feats of athleticism that you didn't know were possible. The handstand on the treadmill sprints is pretty incredible, right. As is this the one you just posted where someone shoots on you, you do a backflip And I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? I mean, I always knew you were athletic, but I mean, it's to a whole new level. So I think anyone will appreciate that. You got to somehow get that video you on the treadmill where you're doing 10-second sprints all out, and then you stop, do a handstand for 10 seconds, and sprint again. It's fucking crazy.
Right, yeah. You got to be a little bit nuts to do what we do, so pushing the limits.
Do you have that one, or is that out there in the ether somewhere?
It's on Instagram somewhere.
Man,
probably a little
you gotta
bit
get
deep,
it.
But yeah, this newest one, the Gainer one, it went viral a little bit. And I saw a bunch of pages that had a couple million hits, and it was on the front page of Reddit the other day, so it went well. So I'm going to try and capitalize on that, and I'm going to do some of the background on how to do a trick like that on my YouTube channel, so stay tuned.
That's awesome. We'll post that in the show notes. And again, Reece, thank you for your time, sir. Enjoy your last couple of days in California, and we'll talk soon, man.
All right, thanks a lot.
And all great things must come to an end. That's the end of this episode, but it's not the end of the season or the show. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you want to support the podcast, please go to iTunes, give us a rating and subscribe, and also check out a wrestlingmind.com for blogs and archived shows. Have a great day.